Завтра гулять будете? Привет. Привет. Ну что вы, Виталик, это вы завтра или сегодня будете гулять? Я отвечаю, Виталик придет или нет?
Мне так плохо, одиноко, без тебя, без тебя, без тебя наебал. You got nerve, you got nerve, bitch, you шукай молодой капнер. You have nerve, bitch, you шукай молодой капнер. Тебе 50 на бабе, сука, Гуччи тапок, так манит запах, мы на порнхабе стати, сука, беру до сзади, калади на яхте, Сучи поднял матрасик, нахуй копить час 5 и стоп. Сука, на мне дай топ, тебе на мне как рот, сука, на мне верхом я бы ты ты планктон. Парень, я подарит, да не буду берегом. Если ты не понял, что я гений, то ты лох. Если ты не понял, что я гений, то ты лох. Ра-да-да-да, let it go, let it go. You have nerve, yeah. You got nerve, yeah. You got nerve, bitch, я вешу как молодой капнер. You have nerve, you have nerve. You have nerve, bitch, я вешу как молодой капнер.
meteorologist Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Gold told British Second Army's Chief of Staff that a miracle might save us from rain, but it was not to be. Allied successes in previous battles of the offensive were aided in large part by dry conditions, but as unseasonably heavy rains returned to the battlefields, so too the fortunes of British and Dominion infantrymen suffered in the battles of Brunswick, Polkapelle, and Passchendaele. German High Command's response to the defeats that they had suffered so far during Third Ypres was to change tactics, reinforcing four German positions with Eingreif units, responsible for immediate counterattacks on frontline positions. These units had previously been held back, resulting in thinner forward defences, which the Allies were easily overrunning in the wake of devastating artillery. The concluding battles began on the 4th of October at Brunswick, which the British hadn't held since 1915. This was the first of three steps that would take the Allied armies to Passchendaele and would be undertaken by all four Anzac divisions, united for the only time during the war. Up from the city of Ypres snaked the Anzac soldiers in their tens of thousands, along Menin Road, past Hellfire Corner, through the Burr Crossroads and Bellevard Ridge. Private Edward Lynch recalled how the whole road is bordered by dead mules, mud-spattered horses, smashed wagons and limbers, and freshly killed men being tossed off the track to leave it open for the never-ending stream of traffic. At 5:20 a.m., 40 minutes before the Allied attack's 0 hour, flares lit up the Anzac's front, and German artillery dealt substantial damage to the attacking force as they waited on their starting lines. 20 minutes later, the Allied artillery began their creeping barrage, and the Anzacs advanced behind the wall of flame and concussion. Initially, they met little resistance. As in previous battles, many of those who had not retreated lay dead or were immobilized in shock and fear. Even a strong counterattack by the Eingreif units, having been moved up to the front, failed to halt the advance, and just over 2 hours into the attack, the Anzacs were on the ridge. Another hour of fighting ensued, but by a little after 9 that morning, a substantial part of Brunswick Ridge was secured. On both sides of the Anzac vanguard, British infantry succeeded in taking their objectives. Atop the ridge, a view east afforded the first look across a less devastated landscape, with Passchendaele a few miles ahead. On the Allied side, the Battle of Brunswick Ridge was popularly seen as a great success, but this optimism failed to account for the fact that part of the ridge remained occupied by German forces, or that their reinforcements were pouring into the second line between Brunswick and Passchendaele. Unseen, even greater numbers were assembling between Passchendaele and Roulers. The official German history recorded the 4th of October as the blackest day of the war, amidst an assembly of black days. And General Erich Ludendorff later observed that we came through it only with enormous loss. His plan to move the Eingreif up to directly support the front lines had been a disaster. Oblivious to sentiments on both sides, the skies had opened up at noon, and torrential rains followed for days, promising a thoroughly miserable month, one in which there would only be 5 days without rain. An unfortunate legacy of the Battle of Polkapelle, which occurred 5 days after Brunswick, was that it misinformed the planning for the subsequent main attack on Passchendaele, which would follow only 3 days later. Both Plumer and Haig believed the advances made at Polkapelle were more significant than they in fact were. By the day of the battle, the 9th of October, heavy rain had been falling steadily for 5 days, and the landscape had once again become a morass of dubious depths. In these conditions, the flow of materiel from artillery guns and ammunition to aid stations and duck balls were all greatly slowed in their progress up the line. The British and Anzac brigades were also now significantly depleted in numbers, and this combined with survivors' exhaustion to seriously test morale. Charles Bean wrote in his diary, "I believe the official attitude is that Passchendaele Ridge is so important that tomorrow's attack is worth making whether it succeeds or fails. I suspect they're making a great bloody experiment. They don't realize how desperately hard it will be to fight down such opposition in the mud. Rifles choked, men tired and slow.
Like a hell, mate.
Artillery shells that made it to the guns had to be cleaned up before they could be used. And despite being supported by fascines of wood and metal, every time the guns fired, they sank deeper into the liquidated ground. The opening barrage of the battle was ineffectual and much weaker than previous battles. And as the guns sank, their shots also missed their
We're all
targets.
ragtime out there.
Despite the weakened artillery support, British and Anzac infantry advanced up the ridge, through the mud, toward concrete pillboxes and unbroken lines of barbed wire. A small group of British officers were even able to advance into the ruined village of Passchendaele before German artillery began to fall on their position, forcing them to retreat. But the main strength of the attack was caught on and below the artillery-damaged ridges, atop which Polkapelle and Passchendaele nestled. And here, a much slower attrition and eventually retreat took place under German sniper, machine gun, and artillery fire. As daylight faded, many soldiers prepared to see out the night in waterlogged shell holes. Moving up through the disarray of the Allied front, Australian and British reinforcements found demoralised and fragmented groupings of soldiers as they prepared as best they could for what might come next. By 1917, more than 500 years old, and no stranger to occupation and siege, the city of Ypres lay in ruins, veiled in smoke and dust. Where once Ypres had rivaled Paris as a flourishing city of textiles, it was now the foremost jumping-off point before the front lines of battle in the British sector, and the most bogged down in mud on the battlefield of the Ypres salient. This newly deployed